Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well today. So today we're back with another discussion video, and today we're going to be covering all of the movement speed changes that RIot is doing since they've announced that they are going to be adjusting different movement speed as well as mobility issues in the game that they want to fix, as well as things that they consider game breaking and want to revert or change. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into it. So the first thing we're looking at, and the biggest thing that we're looking at, is the stride breaker change. So what is removed is the halting slash no longer dashes the user 300 units. The slash damage is changed from 75% of your total AD to 150. The slow is changed from 40% decaying over 2 seconds to 90% decaying to 40% over 3 seconds, and the cooldown is changed. I believe this is reverted from 20 seconds to 15 seconds. Added, halting slash can now be cast while moving, so think of like Darius when he's winding up his Q, or Garen when he just presses his E and starts spinning forward. Basically, that's how that mechanic is going to work. Just in the middle of your movement, it's going to be cast not as an interrupt, but just in combination with you moving. Heroic Gate passive, which is essentially a phage passive, or when you attack or auto attack somebody. 30 movement speed down to 20. Mythic passive, 3% to 2%. This really isn't that big of a deal because it's 1% movement speed, and then the health is going from 200 to 400. So clearly the biggest thing is there is a change from they're replacing the dash with a combination of more damage, lower cooldown, and a huge slow. Now, I think that it feels like 90% to me feels a little busted. I mean, that's like the tail end of Nasus's Wither. I understand why they wanted to make the change to Stride Breaker, simply because, you know, any champ or juggernaut that is melee and immobile, obviously this gives them a dash and breaks what RIot is going for with what their kit is intended. But at the same time, too, putting into context what each sort of bruiser item is, you know, Trinity Force is like your bread and butter damage item. Divine Sunderer is your anti-tank bruiser item. The point of Stride Breaker was to be the gap closer bruiser item, so that way if you needed to get in range of somebody, which has historically over the last few months proven to be the best, because if you can't get your damage off, there's really no point in building an item versus building an item that'll get you into range to deal your damage. So obviously that dash takes precedent in a lot of cases. Gore Drinker versus Stride Breaker. Gore Drinker is the healing bruiser item, and then Eclipse is the combination assassin bruiser item that Ainsley Harriott just took a bunch of stats, threw them into a blender, ground them up over 3 minutes, and looked at me like he was going to have my way over a 5-minute ASMR cooking video. Anyway, so when it comes to Stride Breaker in general, we're obviously going to have to see how this plays out. I feel like it's an okay change. Again, sticking with what RIot wants to do with bruisers and not break their lore, or, you know, their play style, I guess you could call it, with not giving them a free dash when they're not intended to have a dash in their kit. Obviously, them giving back cooldown and damage, as well as this extra 200 health. Obviously, they did a good job trading stats. That I can applaud them for. But we're gonna have to see how this slow plays out, because I'm not exactly sure how I feel about the dash not being there and it just being a slow. So we'll see how this goes. I think it's definitely an okay change. That's where I'll leave that. So Trinity Force. Movement speed 25 to 20, attack damage 30 to 35. So starting on ESPN's 30 for 30, Trinity Force is going 5 for 5. Force of Nature, more like Force of Nostalgia now. Remove no longer stacks magic resist and movement speed. New, unique when immobilized, regenerate 8% of your maximum health over 4 seconds. So obviously, if immobilizations keep happening, this is going to keep proccing the passive. I'm not exactly sure. I believe Immobilize is going to count just like other situations that have immobilize, so such as like Malzahar Ultimate, Malphite Knockup, etc. This is akin to the original Force of Nature, if you remember way back in Season 1 and 2, where it gave you a crap ton of health regen, just blatantly, with no sort of combat condition. So, obviously, since Force of Nature replaced, what was it called? It was the purple item that reduced damage from the same spell. I forget what that was called, but essentially Force of Nature replaces that as the anti-nuke magic resist item. So, this seems like a better change than what Force of Nature originally was intended to be. So, we're going to have to see how this one plays out. It's definitely a minor buff, in my opinion. Black Cleaver, 400 to 450 health, movement speed stack per carve, 5 with max 30, from 3 to max 18. I mean, the thing about Black Cleaver that a lot of people have been talking about, and I think a lot of people have noticed, is it's not that good of an item, especially, before and after the carve change. I'm glad that they reverted back to Season 8 Black Cleaver, which is nice, so you get 30% armor reduction for max stacks. Also, the math kind of feels better on that too, but that's a whole different thing. What I will say about Black Cleaver, again, they're trading stats here, which is kind of nice, even though this is minor, is that it's being shadowed by the fact that there's so many other good bruiser items in the game that it kind of doesn't have a place right now. So, like, the 25 haste is fantastic, 40 attack damage, 450 health, which is what it'll have now, but when you have items like Steric's Gauge giving health regeneration, when you have items like Death Dance, which even Death Dance isn't even that great, giving the negated damage over time, when you have things like Spirit Visage now buffing healing and shields, for bruisers especially, Black Cleaver just doesn't fit into the builds because there's so many other good items to build. So obviously the health is nice, but this really isn't going to help it out too much. Dead Man's Plate is a little confusing when you think about it, but we'll get into this. So charge time, 8 seconds to 4 seconds, so that's nice. Movement speed from 60 to 40. Obviously, this makes sense. Faster charge time, little bit less movement speed, which I'm totally okay with. Damage on hit, 1 to 100 magic damage based on stat count, down to 1 to 40 plus 100% base AD physical damage based on stat count. Now, the thing that doesn't make sense with the base AD is essentially, what you could make interesting about this item is if you give Steric's Gauge its old base AD buff back. So essentially the way it used to work was when you had it fully built, it would give you 50% of your total base AD as an increase, and obviously that would scale up per level with more base AD that you got. Since we don't have that, and as you know, if you're in the middle of combat, every time Dead Man's Plate starts to charge up again, when you get to like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stacks, it'll automatically discharge. So the only item that really gives base AD is Trinity Force. So the thing that's kind of confusing here is that you would think this would force a Trinity Force Dead Man's build in order for this to be good, but because you constantly have that reprocking of the Dead Man's Plate, it really doesn't make sense to give it base AD, even though they're, obviously taking off the magic damage from the charge time. So, is this okay in terms of movement speed? Yes, but if they wanted to really make this an interesting item, going with the base AD stat, then they could experiment with something where the stacks don't just discharge until you get to max stacks, or what they could do is give Steric's AD its base AD stat back, so that way this could actually have some significant value to it. Death Stance, heal on champ takedown, 10 to 15%, removed grants 30% bonus movement speed for 2 seconds. I mean, this is an item that helps keep you going throughout fights, but to be completely honest, and a lot of people are in agreement on this, Death Stance just kind of sucks now with how it works, because even though the damage mitigation is nice originally when they changed it to a bruiser item back in Season 10, it was nice to have that that heal off of physical damage. Now, obviously, we have Omnivamp, so it'd be a little weird to give Death Stance Omnivamp versus the old healing buff, which is how it would work. But the fact that you can't like heal through the damage mitigation is kind of what's disappointing about it. So, again, it's an okay item. Is the movement speed coming off of it? Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's just like that doesn't get granted until takedown. So, that's kind of whatever. Gale Force Mythic Passive, 3% to 2%. I mean, I'm not an ADC player, so I really don't think. But, like, 1% being knocked off is the same with Stride Breaker. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, honestly, because the point is that Dash has a huge range anyway. Prowler's Claw, cooldown going from 60 to 90. Sandswipe targeting any enemy unit to enemy champion. So, a couple things about Prowler's Claw. First of all, this is low-key kind of nice, okay? And the reason I say that is that now that you can only target enemy champions with it, you remove the possibility of you misclicking. So when you target an enemy champion with Prowler's Claw, you know that it's only going to be a champion from now moving forward until they decide to change it in the future. Obviously, this is a nerf for people trying to escape or use enemy units to get around the map, etc. Or if you're a jungler and you're soloing Dragon, you can use this to buff your kit. You could use this to buff your kit a little bit. So it is kind of nice in that regards. The other thing about Prowler's Claw is that I hate the fact that it is such a rough item to use. So essentially what I mean by that is if you watch my advanced league tips video and videos and how I talk about like input buffering things, you can't input buffer anything over top of Prowler's Claw. For some reason, they made it exclusively a single cast item that has no wind-up times around it. So essentially, like when you cast it, you have to wait for the animation to finish as well as your character model to stop in order to cast other abilities. So, in my opinion, this gives the item too high of a skill cap for just the sake that it's an item active, coupled with the fact that you actually have to get timing down on your abilities to use this properly. So I really wish that the item was a little bit more, was way smoother to use, simply for that mechanical reason. So stat-wise, it's low-key nice for people for not having to worry about misclicking anymore. But you do lose the ability to get around the map a little bit more, as well as a jungler possibly buff damage against epic monsters and whatnot. So Shirelia's Battle Song, Inspire Movement Speed, 60, decaying to 30, to 30% non-decaying. Obviously, this hurts hard engage supports and people who build that, but I personally, in my games, haven't seen Shirelia's too much, so, I really don't have much to say about this. Lich Bane, movement speed from 10% to 8%, ability power 70 to 75. Obviously, we're trading stats again. My whole thing with Lich Bane is this really isn't too big of a deal. My whole thing with Lich Bane is give it its 10 haste back, please. There's a whole handful of items you didn't need to take haste off of RIot, and Lich Bane is one of those. Please, just give it 10 haste back. That's all we need. Cosmic Drive, 10 to 30 scaling to a flat 20, so better earlier, not as good later, but by the time you get to late game, you're losing a little bit of value on that 30 movement speed anyway, based off of how movement speed is calculated in your kit. And then ability power, obviously we're trading stats again, going from 75 to 80, so that's nice. And then Nimbus Cloak, which they already nerfed anyway, is going from 520 to 35% to 520 to 25%. So later on, Flash Smite, obviously it's not going to be as good in the game for junglers. So, I mean, this item isn't, like I said, or Rune, isn't as good as it used to be prior, but since they already nerfed it and they're adding another nerf, it's just not that great anyway. So, overall, I would say that we're trading regular stats for damage in this entire change. Going to be very interesting to see how the change in Stride Breaker changes the meta. Maybe we'll see a couple tanks make a comeback, and especially with Mundo being released today. We're going to have to see how all of that plays out. So there's all my thoughts on the movement change, guys. Leave your opinions and thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see each other again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.